With the advent of the CD-ROM, game console manufacturers could not wait to bring the new medium to gamers. Companies touted how the vastly increased storage space could bring new experiences to market. Unfortunately, this also ushered in the era of full-motion video, or FMV for short. While initially selling well and receiving decent critical acclaim, it turned out to be a fad, and by the end of the 90s, the genre was all but dead. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of FMV games, but one can't deny the impact they had on gaming, which is still felt to this day. Things like QuickTime events still linger in blockbuster titles, and many games still utilize voice actors and plenty of scripted sequences to tell a story. And this all began with FMV, so to celebrate a bygone genre, I present 5 full-motion video games.
I got some stuff in her. It's not all strictly legal, but it just might keep you off the wall.
The very first FMV game I ever played was Sewer Shark for the Sega CD. This was a pack-in game with my Model 2 system, and I suspect for many console gamers this was their entry point as well. Sewer Shark takes place in a post-apocalyptic future, where humans are forced to live underground, sort of like The Matrix. Your new job is as a sewer jockey, and it is your duty to rid the sewers of radigators, bats, and other critters for the sake of humanity. Along the way, a robot, which reminds me of Guilty Spark, barks out directions you must follow in the sewers. If you take a wrong turn or fail to turn, you'll eventually hit a dead end and die. Immediately after dying, the credits roll and you have to start all over. While playing this twisted game of Simon, you also have to shoot at the pests found in the sewers, which becomes more deadly as the game progresses. It's semi-interesting from a gameplay perspective, but plays about as simple as it looks. Thankfully, the acting is simply sensational. Every character, from your co-pilot Ghost to Commissioner Stenchler, overacts in the most amazing way, and I can't help but smile every time I fire this up. Sewer Shark was later ported to the 3DO with beefed up visuals, but the low-res, grainy Sega CD graphics do have a certain charm. While it's certainly not the greatest game I've ever played, it's also far from the worst, and a good starting point for any FMV collection. If you happen to own both a Sega CD and Sega 32X, you can play one of the 5 Sega CD 32X games made for this configuration. These are all ports of existing games, but do feature a higher resolution as well as more on-screen colors. Here we have Corpse Killer, developed by Digital Pictures, the same folks behind Sewer Shark. You play the role of a marine dropped onto a tropical island to stop the evil Dr. Hellman and his army of zombies. This really should be played with a light gun, but I don't currently have a way to do this, so I'm using the standard controller. Anyway, the core of the game is shooting some ridiculous-looking zombies as you travel around the tropical island collecting goodies and assisting 2 other characters. First, we have a stereotypical Rastafarian who helps keep everything moving along with plot points and gameplay tips. Second, we have a journalist who is working to uncover the government's role in Dr. Hellman's zombie apocalypse plans. Both characters are incredibly likable and are really the highlight of the game. Corpse Killer was also released on the Sega CD, Sega Saturn, 3DO, Mac, and possibly Windows, but I couldn't find a box to confirm this claim. Someday I'll track down the appropriate light gun, as this doesn't work with Konami's Justifier, and play this game the way it was intended. Until then, I'll enjoy the over-the-top acting in some of video games' worst zombies.
Welcome to hell, sucker! Get your booty down here, you poor damn fool!
Next up is Chaos Control on everybody's favorite game console, the CDI. It was also available on DOS, Mac, Saturn, and PlayStation, which may be better options as the CDI version requires the expensive digital video cartridge. Chaos Control was actually developed by IMPLANTgames, making it even more surprising it made it to the nearly dead CDI in 1995. Unlike the Digital Pictures games, Chaos Control takes itself a bit more seriously, with rather amazing voice acting and a decent mix of hand-drawn and CG graphics. Chaos Control takes place near the end of a war which the humans were last defeated while defending Mars. Now, the alien invaders have their sights set on Earth, and it's up to us to finally defeat them. The gameplay itself is extremely simple. Basically, there is a video streaming and you shoot designated spots on the video. If you hit them, a smoke sprite moves along the screen, but the enemies are still there, on the video. It's kind of jarring at times, as the smoke sprites will block other enemies you haven't hit yet. If you wipe out an enemy early on, you sit there and watch as the smoke moves across the screen. The occasional boss battles are even more awkward, as you might be sitting there for a dozen seconds or so, waiting for the boss video sequence to end. Still, it's not all bad and plays remarkably well using the CDI mouse. The story is coherent and again the highlight of the game. It sets up the next area you have to fight, including New York City, a cyber network, and even space. The ending is satisfying and the game is rather short, which is a good thing since the gameplay is so basic. This one is fairly cheap on the CDI, and while not the best game on the platform, is definitely worth a look if you happen to own one.
That was pretty cool.
Moving on to the next generation of game consoles is Siberia on the 3DO. This was released on pretty much every game console and home computer of the day, so I won't bother to list them all. If I had to use one word to describe this game, it would be ambitious. The developers at Zatrix seemed dead set on pushing FMV to its limits with Siberia, and used every trick in the book to create a unique interactive experience. There are multiple pathways to traverse, interactions with buttons, light puzzle elements, plenty of on-rail shooting, and even some cover-based shooting. Like I said, the developers really did throw everything they could think of at the genre. Of course, being an FMV game, there is a lengthy story here. You play the role of a cyber hacker who has been pardoned by the First World Alliance to infiltrate an enemy cartel base. It's a classic Cold War, East versus West plot with plenty of cyberpunk mixed in for good measure. Unlike the previous 3 games, Siberia is probably best played with a guide. It isn't always obvious where to go, and traversing the wrong way will often result in instant death. The puzzles too can be confusing, and having a guide available will be invaluable. Hardcore types may frown upon this, but I don't find the gameplay mechanics worthy of the headaches a guide-free experience would entail. But back on topic, Siberia is an interesting game with some great ideas. The story is adequate and the set pieces for the most part look terrific. If you keep your expectations in check, you might find a clever moment or two worthy of your time.
What's up, Al?
Wrapping things up is my favorite FMV game to date, Kenji INOSD. This game takes a different approach to the genre, instead aiming to be an interactive movie. Even more interesting is the adventure takes place in the first person, putting you right into the middle of the experience. The game opens with a cinematic explaining a man has gone mad and taken hostages at a local hospital. His daughter Laura arrives at the scene and is allowed in. From here, the hospital transforms into a castle and the adventure begins. Being an FMV game, you don't have the freedom to wander around, but there are enough scripted paths to choose, letting you navigate easily without feeling too restricted. Soon enough, you'll discover you can interact with various items and start making progress. Basically, one item will unlock the next, and so on until the area is cleared. There are light puzzle elements thrown in as well, and unlike Siberia, these are much simpler and less confusing. Still, D isn't without its flaws, and again I would recommend using a guide if you find yourself stuck. D doesn't contain any checkpoints or save points, so if you fail to complete the adventure in 2 hours, you die and the game ends. The eerie soundstage, epic score, cheap jump scares, dark story, and exceptional ending all add up for a must-try if you're mildly interested in horror games or the FMV genre. And D is the perfect game to close out this video. So there you have it, 5 full-motion video games spanning some of gaming's most notorious hardware. Now, this is not a definitive list and certainly not a best of, and there were hundreds of FMV games released during the 90s, so be sure to leave a comment and let me know some of your favorites.